Welcome back to the Forever is the Soul journey. This week we have reached chapter 18. We're closing in on the end, which is sort of sad in some ways, but I'm sure we'll do something exciting to follow this up, so stand by. But for chapter 18, the title is When a Dream is More Than a Dream, and the subtitle is To Love the Self as the Self Loves You is to embrace the thousands of faces that came into being before you. So that's another very interesting topic, and I'm sure Andrew will have some really interesting things to say about this. So enjoy.
Welcome back to the Forever Journey. It's not forever. There's only 3 more weeks to go. This one and 2 more. So I'm excited to kind of wrap this up because I've got other things planned that I want to do for those that want to come along on whatever the next journey is. But we'll stay with where we are today, which is chapter 18. When a dream is more than a dream. To love the self as the self loves you is to embrace the 1,000 faces that came into being before you. To love the self as the self loves you, that implies a duality. So that, for those that have listened to all these videos, understand that I'm talking about the ego and the soul. And it says the ego loves the soul, in a sense, its creator. If you can go to a place where you recognize that the soul sent you on this earthly journey in the first place. So everything that's happened to you in this lifetime has been caused by a relationship between you, your ego, and who you are spiritually, if you can take that belief. Now, as I said before, this is all fiction because it's a fictional book, right? But I believe that the soul chooses the lifetime it needs to live, and there's all kinds of things, dharma and karma and all kinds of different philosophies that support the idea that the soul migrates through many, many lifetimes. And I do believe that. I don't believe that I'm sustained, but I believe that I add to, as I've said in other videos, I'm just a small aspect of the totality. So to love the self, and I think that's probably the trickiest thing to do. First of all, one has to determine what is love, and depending on those earliest algorithms, how you were raised, what were the circumstances of your childhood, where your ability to fit in and become the sports star or whatever it was that you needed to be, that is going to influence and perpetuate the creation of algorithms that sustain a perception or a feeling that we associate with love. But again, poets have been trying to write about love forever. And I think at the core, love to me, as I've said before, is, in a way, it's a transcendent experience. It's the transcendence of fear. Fear being very biological, therefore mortal, in spirit, where there isn't the biological imperative influencing what one would perceive on a conscious level, then what happens from that perspective is that there isn't fear, so there's only love. So if you look at the universe, we're going to go really big for a second. If the universe, going back to Big Bang, just wants to expand, well, it's just expanding in nothing in a way. But what it isn't expanding into is fear. So if one wants to add something to that nothingness or to that expansion, it's love. It's just like the soul or the whole thing is one big energy field. We're just a small part of it. We're cognitive of that small part as we live within this physical realm in our little individual personalities. But I believe, and certainly throughout the book, this migration that Dennis and Maria, the stars of the book, get to go on, is that assimilation into that big, big picture of love. Love of itself, love of the universe, love of the earth, love of the people on the earth, and love of the progressionary state that they begin to understand as being what it is that we're all about. What I mean by that is right back to primitive times, this continually developing a neurological system that's capable of sustaining an awareness that's greater than the physical plane itself. So it's the blending of 2 realities, physical and spiritual. As I've said before, I think it has a lot to do with left hemisphere, right hemisphere, heart chakra, meaning opening up to the heart and understanding that there is no saying, what is that? There's nothing to fear but fear itself, something of that sort. Because fear is biological. It's all tied into our nervous system. And it does very much influence what we're experiencing in our conscious level. How open are we? How willing are we just to be ourselves? How silly can we be? How serious can we be? All these different things are all coming through the emotional body, which I think is the reflection here. To love the self as the self loves you is to embrace the 1,000 faces that came into being before you. So if you look at before you, the last two words, before you is right now. It's right this second. So all these different faces, what are these faces? They're emotions. They're just emotions. I'm really sad. I'm really happy. I'm really angry. All these different emotions that are all very biologically rooted in the limbic system as it takes incoming data and converts it into biochemistry, which we call emotions. So the 1,000 faces that I'm referring to in this little idea is we're so emotionally based until we learn not to be. So I guess the challenge or the evolution is can we learn to not over intellectualize it? I think there's a big difference between feeling and emotion. When you feel right with the universe, when you feel right with yourself, when you feel right with a line you just drew because you're an artist, or a note that you just hit because you're a musician, or a word you just wrote because you're a writer. When you feel these things, it's just a feeling that feels right. That's right, that's a good feeling. As opposed to emotion, which is far more intrusive. Even laughter. You're having a perfectly good day and someone tells a joke and now you're laughing hysterically and you can't stop laughing. You're out of control. I'm joking, but the point I'm trying to make is that our emotional body so often dominates our intellectual body to such a degree that we can't really see through the veil into the other parts of who it is that we are within ourselves. So when I think about when a dream is more than a dream, the reference to that is that we can be in two places simultaneously. We can be here and we can be there. And what that represents to me is truly, let's just put this down, a whole brain experience. It's like left hemisphere, right hemisphere. As a writer, you sit there and you're kind of going, just example, left hemisphere, oh, what do I got to write? Okay, what's the previous sentence saying? How are we going? Where are we going with this? And you produce a lot of emotion. When you go into coherence, which is the left and the right brain working together, then you're tapping into emotion. It's not you're producing an emotion that's starting to get frustrated or agitated because it's not writing properly. It's just going into a place where all of a sudden the right hemisphere, because you're being passive, starts to open up and you kind of go, oh, that's a cool idea. And you just start to craft with words the idea that you saw. And then, next sentence comes, the next sentence comes, the next. When I was writing the book, I was, as I said, physically challenged with some neurological problems. And the amount of expectation I put on myself, and I get nowhere. And I learned through the writing of the book. And then I started to interface that concept of, okay, now I'm writing and I'm getting nowhere because I'm being very expectational. And then I kind of digressed and looked at my life and I went, oh my God, how much energy do we actually produce through the whole constructs of what we perceive to be expectations that we're pushing ahead of ourselves and throwing ourselves completely out of coherence and negating our greatest talents and attributes, which I believe comes through passivity, the heart, and the right hemisphere, as I've said many times before. So when I look at this story and I look at the feeling that comes through chapter 18, which is really all about, in a way, how do you get to that place inside where you can go passive and see through the veil and see the bigger parts of who you are and the creativity of who you are? How do you do that? You kind of, I like the idea of redemption or absolution, where you can go to a place inside yourself and you can go, okay, wait a second. If my soul, being much bigger than me, much more expansive than me, and in coherence with perhaps even a God concept, chooses to come to the earth plane and manifest me, this little ego that I will become, if that energy field, okay, set me or itself on this journey and download it into my brain, just like a computer software, all these various different algorithmic patterns or programs that then influence my conscious perception of reality at any given time, and have also thrown into this whole equation this huge emotional body that's very reactive because it's tied to fear. And I go to a place where I'm just conscious and I accept. I love the word grooming. I've been groomed to be in this moment right now. Now, yesterday or the day before, or a week ago or a month ago, I might have been really angry, and I have to assume that I was meant to be there as well. I'm always more, never less. The only place that I can determine the moreness or the lessness or put value to is how do I interpret it? How do I interpret this really bad thing that happened to me? Did it make me more happy or less happy? So if one's always aspiring to a greater sense of happiness, well-being, and joy, and one's orientation consciously is towards the observation of those progressions, then one inevitably will get to a place where they just feel that it's all the way it's supposed to be, and that what will come next as it's supposed to come next, as everything else preceded did the same thing. We all get to go on this journey that is wonderful and exciting and happy and painful and sorrowful and angry and hostile. It's just our emotional body taking control of our intellectual body. When I look at the vehicle that I live in, I see it in 4 distinctive patterns: physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. I believe that we can share our consciousness with our souls, and in order to do that, okay, to cognitively understand the duality and feel the presence of that in your life, you have to pacify the emotional body and just simply understand that the emotional body is what's creating the distortion when it's utilizing algorithms that have really no relevance to, in a sense, corrupt and hijack the consciousness and take it into places of worry or fear or self-doubt, or I'm not good enough, or I'll never be able to write a book, or whatever it is. And we all have these narrations going on in our minds, in our conscious experience. And that, to me, is the next step. It really is the ability to go, okay, I gotta pacify. The world's crazy, I'm not. And if you look around, it is a little bit nuts out there. I'm not crazy, I'm just a little human being or a great big soul trying to figure it out and contribute whatever I can to a future that is not as disruptive as this one is on so many people. The inequitabilities, and we could go on and on and on about just what's going on the planet right now. But I think that this is the strife, this is the tension that we're all feeling, that will ultimately lead to this next step in our evolutionary journey, which brings a greater portion of us, meaning percentages, to a higher frequency where they know, they see it, they understand it, and then their oscillation as they bring energy down through the physical form is part of what's evoking the evolution of the change. So it's almost like the strife that's happening on the planet right now is evoking a lot of contemplation. Contemplation is the reorganization of thought in order to be able to bring ourselves to a different thought that is more tuned to a collective. The book, as I said in the God chapter, I see through the eyes of God as God sees through my eyes. There is no separation. The implication is that on an energy field, we're not all the same. We're all aspects of the same thing, collecting information, expanding consciousness as the Big Bang continues to travel through the universe, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we are is just a small part. All of us, all 7 billion of us, are just a small part of that totality, learning eventually to cooperate so we don't screw up the earth plane. These are my thoughts on Travelers in a Dream. I think I've been in a dream most of my life, and I think it's a dream that's coming true. Bye.